Hello everyone and welcome to Tom's Tomb of Horror. I hope you're doing good and well. So it's time for my first real film review on the channel actually. I have done some shorts of my reactions to films and kind of, I guess, 1 minute long reviews, but I haven't done a proper video dedicated to a specific film yet. I've done obviously franchise rankings and the like, but this feels like my first video really kind of covering a recent release and doing a review of it. And we're talking about We Bury the Dead. Which actually came out at the end of 2024, originally at Adelaide Film Festival in Australia, but it was later more widely released earlier this year. And that I came to see it on Amazon Prime and I actually got it on Blu-ray as well, because I really quite enjoyed this. So, first of all, this was directed by Zak Hilditch. It stars Daisy Ridley, Mark Cole-Smith, and Brenton Thwaites. And briefly, I will kind of give a quick plot synopsis. This is about a woman called Ava, who is played by Daisy Ridley, and she is searching for her missing husband in Tasmania after a military experiment goes disastrously wrong and suddenly seems to kill a lot of people. She volunteers to be part of a body retrieval unit, which is as grim as it sounds, but whilst kind of on that sort of voluntary task force, she meets another character called Clay, and they eventually both kind of, go looking for her missing husband, presumably hoping he's not dead. Obviously, it is discovered that bodies are also coming back to life as well, which is, I guess, is the zombie apocalypse element. But this isn't your typical zombie apocalypse kind of thriller or anything like that. Not like the earlier series of Walking Dead TV episodes or your zombie classics. This is a bit more of a thoughtful, slow burn. Even ambient at times, I have to confess, even despite some of the serious subject matter that comes up in this film and the serious topics, I kind of found this film oddly serene at times. And I think that a lot of that is due in part to the soundtrack and the visuals. So I'm going to move on to talk about some of this films because I'm bordering on touching on some of the film's strengths. So I'm going to start by touching on the positives of We Bury the Dead, what I really enjoyed about it. And there were quite a few things I did like about this film. So first of all, the performances are all good. Daisy Ridley, I think, is pretty outstanding. I think she's quite an underrated actress. I mean, she's come out of the shadow of, the somewhat beleaguered Disney sequels of Star Wars, which I personally didn't mind. I'm going to get some hate for saying that. But I don't think that the acting in those films was at all bad. I thought Daisy Ridley was pretty good as Rey in those films. I'm going to say that. I'm going to put that out there and defend her on that. I thought she was good as Rey in the Star Wars films. But before I go down that rabbit hole completely, let's get back to We Bury the Dead. But because I thought her performance was really sensitive here, it was more serious than obviously the ones I've seen her in before, like in Star Wars. This is a really serious character who is grief-stricken, who is going through something very, very difficult. And she is faced with a very strange situation, trying to find her husband in this in this apocalyptic scenario in Tasmania. And some really dark things come up. I mean, when she meets a particular character who threatens her, and that shows, I think, Daisy Ridley's ability as well to kind of, her body language throughout the film is great at portraying anxiety, dealing with threat, and trying to escape from difficult situations and conveying real emotions. Like, I think she does all of that really well. So definite strength of this film, I think, is Daisy Ridley's central performance as Ava. I think it's really good. And it elevates some of the scenes, because of her gravitas, it sort of elevates some of the scenes which are quieter and more serene, of which there are quite a few kind of transitional scenes like that in the film. So I feel like she's kind of the foil that is really quite often holding this film together. I have to talk about Clark's soundtrack, who is apparently, I did a bit of research on Clark. This is a British electronic musician, and the soundtrack to this film kind of gives it this purposeful ambience. It feels like every kind of little theme is fitting nicely into transitions and to really spectacular visual moments as well, where there are kind of bird's eye views, I think, of Australia and Tasmania. They're really good, like bird's eye camera shots, and they're paired up really well with the music and the score. And I think the soundtrack is another highlight for me. Something I really enjoyed. As very much someone who loves music and soundtracks to films, that was actually a strength of this. I thought it was kind of very moody and atmospheric and worked brilliantly with the mood of the film. Like I say, despite it being a zombie apocalypse film, it was able to create a zombie apocalypse film with a certain ambience that for me worked with the melancholy and the grief elements, or the sort of dramatic elements that the film was also trying to get across to us as audience members. So yes, whilst the zombie apocalypse theme is well worn in both film and TV formats, I liked how this did a slightly different spin of making it more personal, more based on a sort of someone's kind of not backstory, but sort of their, their life story, if you like, a little bit more, and seeing through the lens of somebody that is actually having to go through this almost in real time and deal with the emotions of that in the immediate aftermath of a disaster instead of some months after. I think a lot of zombie apocalypse films are usually after the events or some time after. So I liked its approach to that. For me, the negatives of this film, I felt that the pacing was often a little bit too slow for me. That wasn't, for 2/3 of this film, I didn't mind that. But towards the end, I felt like the film would have benefited from, even if just a short action sequence or two, just to kind of really, heighten the tension that bit more and, make the film kind of, the climax of the film even better. Not that I minded, I thought the quiet scene at the end was really, really good with Clay and Ava together. I thought that was excellent. But I felt like before it could have done with some kind of sequence to heighten the stakes, a bit more action in that sense. But I'm not saying I think this film needed to be an action film at all. I think it worked as this kind of atmospheric ambient zombie drama. I think it worked on that level. But I just felt, just to give it an even more dynamic vibe, it could have done with that towards the end. Just at least one good action scene for me. So if you are a fan of more action-filled zombie thrillers, this might not be a film so much for you. And despite the revelations that come at the end of the film with the characters, I still felt that, some of their backstories could have been better written or teased. There are a lot of still shots here, and because the film is so sort of ambient and so slow, it kind of almost feels more visually focused at times than it does at really painting the characters and their true backstories. But despite that, I enjoyed this. Probably when I saw it online, I enjoyed it more than I expected to. Like I say, I think Daisy Ridley is great. And I hope she goes on to do more horror if she's going to do performances like this. I would certainly be all for that. And I'm going to give this one a final score on the 2 of a 7.25 out of 10, because I felt it's just very slightly better than it. It's a solid 7 at least, this one for me. But I don't think it was anything spectacular. But in this kind of genre, I welcomed its slightly different angle to your typical zombie film, and I really enjoyed Daisy Ridley's performance as Ava. So for that reason, I'm giving it a 7.25 out of 10 as my final score. Hope you enjoyed the review. Do drop a like and a sub if you're new to the tomb. Otherwise, and from me until next time, on the tomb, it is bye for now.